Moderna is doing great. I mean, obviously, this would be great news if it goes forward. So we'll have to keep watching. What's interesting to note is that while we saw the market rally on some lower case counts in New York early on in this bull market off the March lows, what we've seen lately is there's been less of a correlation between the COVID headlines and the market, whether they be good or bad. Bad news lately in rising case counts hasn't been met with major selling in the market. And whereas good news hasn't necessarily been met with additional follow through. Take, for example, we break this whole rally off the March lows into three acts. And the third act from the June high to now, we've seen the S&P gap up over 0.5%, 7 times now. And on those days, it was mostly related to positive news related to the outbreak, whether it be good vaccine news, lower case counts, or something to that matter. In 6 of those 7 days, when the S&P gapped up 0.5% or more, from the open to close, it traded lower for an average decline of about 0.8%. So we haven't. There's been a little bit of less of a correlation between the market and the COVID headline. So it's not entirely surprising, but hey, it would be great news, and hopefully it keeps getting better on that front.
So let's dive into that, Paul, because listen, this is our 4th pandemic in 102 years. People forget about 57 and 68. They obviously weren't as severe as 1918 or maybe even now, but they existed. In 57, we got a vaccine a few months in, so that's sort of a separate story. Pandemics, the other 2 that we've had, tend to last about a year. They kind of come and go in waves. Do you think the market, which prices out 9 months, so to speak, and we're 3 to 4 months really into the pandemic, do you think the market has priced in a pandemic exit already, whether that is because of a vaccine early or just natural herd immunity? Are we looking toward the end of it at some point?
Yeah, I mean, I think, as Dr. Scott Gottlieb has said on the network several times, by January, he thinks we're going to be through it one way or the other with a vaccine, or just because so many people will have gotten it. And what we've learned from all these past pandemics is that none of them have been the end of the world. I mean, not to diminish anything, this has been a terrible outbreak, terrible pandemic on both a health and economic perspective. So it's nothing to dismiss, but eventually we will get through this, and we will get through it. And we are already 3 or 4 months in, and the Fed has come in and said they are going to be there, and they're going to be having the fire hose of liquidity. So when you have that combination, I don't think there's any concern on the market's perspective right now that we're going to see the Fed take away any sort of accommodation earlier rather than later. So that's something that has the wind at your back for now. And if that does change, that would obviously be a negative for the market. But at this point, we're going to get through this at some point. And the news we've seen on Moderna is positive and hopefully gets us through it sooner rather than later.
Yeah, we will, and we have. I mean, that is what history has told us about, any of these pandemics going back however many years that you want. And is there the expectation, Paul, that the vaccine, which may be the biggest news of all, and let's hope that this works. Who knows? The results are good, but it is early, and even when we get it, it certainly would take a long time to distribute. The idea of a vaccine from a market's perspective, I would assume, is that maybe it pulls forward some of those optimistic views, the estimates of when we can go somewhere again, do something, right? That's probably why we're seeing the travel stocks higher this morning. We just advance sort of the natural process of it, if you will.
Yeah, so I mean, brings things forward. Like you said, all these reopening stocks are looking like they're going to do a lot better because we can get things sooner rather than later. I mean, we've gotten to this. I mean, we're talking about yesterday and the day before. The worries were. I mean, we're talking about schools and how it's seemingly like less and less possible that schools are going to be opening in a normal fashion, and that stops a lot of things from happening. So if we can get this timeline, like you said, brought forward, then we're in a much better position overall for the economy. The recovery comes sooner, and things get back to normal sooner.